Hi, I'm Kristen Oaks-White.
And I'm Avery Davidson. Thank you for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Agriculture, the only TV show bringing Louisiana farmers and consumers together every week.
The Mississippi River at Baton Rouge is at 41 feet and falling. This after the Army Corps of Engineers opened 210 bays at the Bonnet Carre Spillway.
That has 200 cubic feet of fresh water flowing into Lake Pontchartrain every second. This marks the third time the Corps has opened the spillway since 2010. As TWILA's Karl Wiggers shows us, past openings of the spillway killed off oysters, but this time it could breathe fresh life into the industry.
These aerial shots of water flowing through the Bonnet Carre Spillway are from the last time the Army Corps of Engineers opened the bays. That was in 2011, and it was devastating to Louisiana oyster farmers, still reeling from the Gulf oil spill in 2010. But this time is different, according to Dr. John Supan with the LSU Ag Center. He says the flow of fresh water into oyster beds in 2010 and 2011 came in the months of April and May. He says fresh water in January should bring about a different outcome for oyster farmers.
Now, the effects of the freshwater can be very beneficial or it can be very detrimental. It has to do with the location of the reef and its proximity to the fresh water. And how long the fresh water is there. Whether oysters live or die from the fresh water depends on how fresh it gets and how warm it is at the time. So having a flood event like this in January is much less detrimental to the oysters than having a flood like this in May and June when the water temperatures are much higher.
Supan says that this event should be much less detrimental, but there's still a chance that oysters could die.
Every oyster's dead. You may still have some oyster mortalities in the Lake Bourne area and the Biloxi Marsh area. It'll depend on how long that fresh water lays around in there. Having some strong tides will be very helpful to mix all that up. But generally speaking, when we have a Bonnet Carre Spillway opening, 2 years later, fishery abounds. Okay, we have big bumps in production of shrimp and crabs and oysters. Fresh water is good for the marsh. It just depends on how fresh it gets.
And it appears there will not be much more fresh water flowing into Lake Pontchartrain now that the Army Corps of Engineers is already closing bays as the Mississippi River falls.
Well, I think having a little freshet, as I call it right now, having a crest come down the river as it did, is generally going to be very positive for the oyster industry, as long as it doesn't last too long, and it appears that it's starting to taper off pretty well. Be real interesting to see if we have another one as the snow melts.
The Corps will close more bays of the Bonnet Carre as the river recedes. Corps officials expect to close the entire spillway by the end of the first week of February. And guys, I made the trip down Tuesday, and it was quite a long trip there, and I did not know what I was getting into. It was straight turn, small road, big road, small road, and God.
Yeah, but the scenery going down to Grand Isle is absolutely amazing. And you had mentioned that this was the first time you had gone down there. What'd you think whenever you got to 310?
I didn't know where I was going because it was all new to me, and I was going like out of civilization. That's what it looked like.
That's funny because that was one of the very first, if you remember when we went to cover the oil spill with Mike Dana, that was one of the first stories that I went on down there. And it's like you think there has to be an easier way to get to where you're trying to go, but there's only one way to get there, and it's a long drive.
But you know, talking about getting somewhere, we are now glad to have you aboard here at This Week in Louisiana Agriculture. Karl is our new reporter, and I tell you what, you come from a great ag background. Father's involved up there in Franklin Parish. He's also very involved with Farm Bureau. Tell me, what are your thoughts about being here now?
I'm really excited. I did an internship a few years ago. As y'all remember, I shared an office with Mr. Avery here. And
that's a dangerous thing.
I'm really excited to have my own desk out of his office. Love him, but I'm excited about that.
No heavy metal music while you're trying to work.
No heavy metal music.
Well, we're happy to have you aboard. Thank you very much, Karl Wiggers.